Hello, hello, hello. It's Holly Rustick here with Grantmaking and Funding, and I'm really excited to have back on the show again this year because we keep pulling her back on because of everything with federal grants, and that is Rachel Werner, and she is the CEO of RBW Strategy Consulting and the principal of My Fed Trainer. So everything with federal grants. We're going to talk about the shutdown today, y'all. We're going to talk about the government shutdown. So welcome back, Rachel. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, thank you. It's just been a busy time. Busy, busy, busy.
Yeah. I've seen you all over. I'm going to move my mic over a little bit. So, okay, there we go. So I have seen you like all over LinkedIn talking up. I've been following you and I've been telling people of their federal grant writers. I'm like, follow Rachel. You've been staying on top of all of the things with all of the things this year. Like we've been through a year that's very interesting. And it's funny because like I was just telling people today and I'm like, I've been writing grants for more than 20 years. So I've been through 4 shutdowns, right? So it's not necessarily new, but we've been through COVID, we've been through the '08 recession, we've been through some things, right? But I'm like, it is different this year, although it's also like change. And that's, like to also kind of like level set nervous systems. I'm like, there's always something new too. And yes, this is unprecedented. I don't want to like Pollyanna it, but at the same time, I'm like, we're still seeing grants rolling in. We're still seeing people get clients. We're still seeing like it's still a part of the economy in that regard as well. But we need to talk about some elephants in the room this year, right? We need to talk.
Big
Zoom
elephants.
through
Yes.
the house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so thanks for coming back on. I know we want to like lean into the government shutdown, but just to like kind of like position people in this structure, like, and I know we talked about the 2025, the new administration impacts and all that, but can you kind of like level set just to wrap us up this year if somebody's like, I don't really know what's going on, like I've heard about it, but the impact on grant writing.
Okay, yeah. So if you've been living under a rock, or perhaps you've just, have maybe it's like the Truman Show where you have like the whole world is going on around you. So, I mean, essentially what's happened is that, with every new administration, we always see changes. That's just,
Mhm.
as you've been doing grants for a long time, I've been doing grants for a long time. You expect to see changes in programs. You expect to see eligibility requirements change. You expect to see, just different focus areas for each agency. So, but I think what has really changed is one, there's been the plethora of executive orders that
Yeah.
are being pushed down by this administration. And the thing about it is that executive orders in and of themselves are not legislative. So they're not
Mhm.
legislative documents, but until they are enacted by the different agencies through their guidance or through different regulatory changes or authorized in congressional acts, then it becomes something that's legally binding. And because there's a lot of executive orders that are targeting, nonprofits, municipalities in the way that certain populations, indirect cost rates, federal grant making. So it's areas that have traditionally been left, alone or not really focused on as much. And the speed with which things are happening has been
Mhm.
the huge impact. When Doge came in and started doing all those cuts, Q1 of this calendar year, I mean, that had a huge impact in the sector. And we also see, and that's what's kind of happening with the shutdown, is what's going to happen with the big beautiful bill, and how is that going to be authorized, and in what way, what programs are going to be cut, because the agencies can't move forward until the act is authorized. So we don't know what the next fiscal year funding is going to look like. So of course that impacts federal grant making, because if you don't know what the different priorities are, if you don't know how the agencies are going to administer that, then you're kind of left in a holding pattern.
Looking at this too, like you had come on, we had talked about the overall, just the EOs, like the different things going on at the time. I think you came on in Q1, now that you're reminded me that you had come on so, of the year around then. And now we're in, so just for also positioning, we're in October 9th, 2025, right? Recording this. And So a lot has changed, as you mentioned. Like, we have seen changes in grants. We did start seeing more grants coming out recently over the summer. That was great. We're seeing more grants coming out, getting awarded and being pushed through. But like in the lens of the government shutdown, so we are seeing like these things. And as you mentioned, like there has been different priorities and there's been different shiftings, and these EOs like are now like, I guess, becoming more legally binding for some of the guidance and compliance. Would you say that's true now that we're seeing that? Or have we seen that shift yet? Or is that still in process?
This is the legal gray area. This is the
Yeah.
area that, because the thing is that what the administration is trying to do is have the agencies kind of codify and try to put
Hmm.
them into their
Hmm.
requirements for the applicants to ensure that they adhere. Like they have to adhere to the DEI policies, they have to adhere to the clean energy, all of those different executive orders that have come out. So it's really in the eligibility requirements. And the thing is that those are going to be included in the terms and conditions of the notice of grant award. So that's really the legally binding document, right? Because you
Yeah.
can, like a guidance in and of itself is not legally binding, but once it's included in the terms and conditions, then that's legally binding. Then you are
Yeah.
going to be held accountable to that. And so that's why it's important to understand what you're on the hook for, what you
Right.
are going to be signing up for. And so that's what's really changed in federal grant making is really understanding the eligibility requirements and understanding the program rules and the priorities of the agency.
Hmm.
Because that's always been something that we've
Yeah.
looked at, but now it's even more critical because they're using that as leverage to rescind funding.
Right. And I think that's what's really different, because even in the last administration, other administrations before this, like if they had something like an EO, or if they had something where they wanted to promote something, it wasn't necessarily as much like in the eligibility, all of that. It was more like you would get priority points for focusing on it. So it wasn't like the takeaway, it was like the give. It's like the other lens of that, right? And now we're seeing like, no, we're going to strip it from even happening. Like you can't even do it. Like if you know what I mean, for like whatever priority that is. And I think for me, does that kind of ring true as well
I
from
would
your?
agree because even
Mhm.
I've been talking to a couple colleagues even about you're talking about like the priority areas like opportunity zones, tribal communities,
Mhm.
all of those kinds
Yeah.
of you get special points depending on where you are, and some of those aren't even included in some of the eligibility requirements, and
Yeah.
that's and so I think now it's just we understand what these priorities are. They made it very
Yeah.
clear. And so, and each agency is kind of interpreting them differently. So it's going to
Yeah.
look a little bit different. And I think that's the thing that's really difficult because before it was just kind of standard across the board,
Mhm.
what things would be prioritized. But now it's, as you said, it's more, punitive
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
how it could really work against you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And then, so okay, so let's talk about. So we kind of gave the picture of like what's kind of happening, and how federal agencies are still processing through that. And I did see you had a post just the other day on LinkedIn, and you talked about, hey, even if you got a grant awarded before the uniform guidance had changed, you have to comply with what it is now. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so and that's another fun fact because that's not going to be in all the terms and conditions. So I
Mm-hmm.
was actually doing a training a couple weeks ago and they were talking it was specifically about the CDBG grants for HUD
Okay.
and how
Yep.
and it was just issued just like a day or two before the training. So we're talking about very end of September, right
Okay.
before everything shut down. And in the, because traditionally, when you would get a notice of grant award, you would abide by the uniform guidance at the time it was issued, so
Hmm.
not afterwards. Because I would get a lot of questions when the big updates came out last October and just saying,
Yeah.
well, our award was issued on like September 29th. And I say, well, that was before the new
Yeah.
guidance was issued. So you have to abide by, what the requirements were before that time. So whatever the uniform guidance was before the major updates. But now in CDBG, it's saying, no, you have to abide by anything new. So you constantly have to be aware of any updates. So it's
Oh,
more
that's
of,
so tricky.
it's like a moving target, because
Yeah.
if you, I mean, people who are doing these programs are not following the requirements. They're not,
No, no.
they're not, going on webinars trying to figure out like 2 CFR 200, and it's really tricky. So, and the thing is, that's just one program. And
Hmm.
that's not necessarily going to be the case for every single requirement. So, for different terms and conditions. So it really is, it takes a real understanding of what to look for, and what you need to be on
Right.
the look for.
And that goes to your point. I know we were chatting a little bit, like where what you're doing more in business this year, and you said it's compliance. A lot of you've been getting hired, right, to help organizations just stay up to date with it, because, like as you mentioned, they're not paying attention to what's going on. Like, they're not. They're running their organizations, right?
Yeah.
They're running the programs, all of the things. So, like, for you to come in and that's like, because that is, oh man, I can't believe that. Like, they're making you stay, in compliance with the updated ones when things change, even like your indirect cost rate, you didn't ask for that much or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and that's a lot of work. And that's what we've also been leaning into this year is don't call yourself a grant writer, call yourself a grant strategist, because it's a lot of strategy work right now. And into the next year or two, like we're going to be seeing this right as well. So that's where you've been leaning into a lot of strategy updates, training, all of that for your services.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I
Mhm.
would say for anybody who's doing grant writing, you need to position your clients for what they're on the hook for.
Yeah.
Don't just, or your organization if you work in house, like do not assume that just because you write a grant, your work is done. You have to be preparing them for, because I even, sometimes train people on how to look in the notice of funding opportunity to say, this is your treasure chest of information. You're going to find
Yeah.
information about the budget. You're going to find information about how you want to tailor your programs, and you're going to find information on what you're on the hook for afterwards.
Hmm.
And if you're not
Hmm.
really clear about understanding those specific requirements, and don't go after the funding, because you're just, and
Yeah.
especially now if things are moving target, and that's just one, I imagine
Yeah.
there's going to be more. I'm gonna not, I mean, what's going to happen when the shutdown is over and the new notices of funding opportunity are issued? Like there's going to be more in there, especially
Yeah.
after the latest executive order in August. There's going to be more in there that's going to be scrutinized. So it really
Hmm.
takes a keen eye to know what it is that you have to be aware of.
Right, right. And yeah, it is. And it takes that extra knowledge and that expertise, right? And that's
Mhm.
something you guys can learn. Like as grant writers, you can learn how to do that. As you're saying, you train people how to do that. So let's talk, okay, let's go into the down and dirty now. Government shutdown.
Yep.
We're like on week two. So yeah, so tell us, how is that impacting grants right now? Like we have seen grants coming out still, but project officers might not be available, like all of the things. Like if you need, are we seeing grants now get delayed that were had deadlines during this time? Like tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So there's delays, and
Mhm.
also, I mean, the biggest issue is with regard to drawdowns and reports, because right now, they queue
Yeah.
the quarterly deadlines for your financial reports are at the end of October, and if you need
Mhm.
to get those done, there's a lot of confusion about that. If you need feedback, if you need additional, I mean, and the thing is that compliance doesn't end just because there's a shutdown. You have to
Right.
continue to do all the things to manage your program. But now
Yeah.
there's also concern, and I think that it's really the cash, because if you can't draw down funds, if you can't access those resources, and you can't pay your staff, you can't pay your contractors or your subrecipients, so now they're going to be
Mhm.
concerned. And the other thing, I'm sure you can relate to this, that nonprofits don't exactly have a lot of cash reserves to
Right.
offset some of the financial situations that they're dealing with right now. And so I think that's the biggest issue. And the other thing too is that I'm also questioning is that for those awards that are issued and awarded for the last fiscal year, are there going to be any changes to them in the new fiscal year? and, how you were going to find that out. And, because things are still in flux right now. So I think that obviously the lack of communication, but I think that's been the most impactful for, organizations, is getting any, pathway to do things. So.
Right. And like, what is your recommendation right now? Are there people that are still able to draw down monies because like those things are more automated, if they don't have to speak to a program officer, or does everything have to be online? You know what I mean? Like, how have you seen people being able to still draw down and some not, like that sort of situation?
I think it depends. I think it
Yeah.
really, really does depend on, it depends on the agency, depends on the drawdown method, just depends. Yeah,
Yeah.
depends on a number of factors. But yeah, and I think also where it could really impact is if you're trying to do something like a budget modification,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
like,
You need
yeah,
feedback, you
like
need that back and forth. Yeah.
because if you're trying to finalize a negotiated direct cost rate agreement, or all of those types of things, because that's where where there could be. But yeah, for those automated processes, yeah, there should still be some movement towards there. I mean, and that's a question too, with these systems like grants.gov. I mean, who's monitoring it if the government is shut down? I mean, that's like, how is that
Yeah.
being managed? And I mean, I can understand if it's like an agency website, that's definitely going to be shut down, because
Right.
there's not going to be any ability to submit your application, like NSF. And I know SAMHSA, other, they're using different systems, but yeah, it's tricky, because I think you just kind of have to look at it a case by case basis to see, because it's really hard to generalize, because it depends on who's managing it. And
So, do you feel like with this time, then, like, what are some other things that if this shutdown continues on, the last one was like 34 days around there, like, if this one continues on, and do you kind of see it continuing on? Like, do you have any insight into this just from what you've seen?
um I mean, I think right now it's sort of a game of chicken, and we're just trying to see, if there's going to be any wiggle room. I think the last time that we had a really long shutdown, what really caused the concessions were the air traffic controllers, and how much it
Hmm.
impacted air travel. And so we're already starting to see delays, and so we're going to have to see how much of these other sort of ancillary services that people don't see as government functions are going to impact. If the airports are completely shut down and people are calling their elected officials in a rage, then that might make some movement. But I think that right now we're just going to have to see how there. I have heard that there is like a small coalition of maybe those in the center ish trying to come together for some solutions, but I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
day by day thing. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And then do you feel like the main thing that we would be for as grant writers, as grant strategists, as in the grant world, like looking at this keeps delaying, it really is the funding. But it's also like access to apply to new funding. Like if these deadlines were happening during this time, like they've been paused, hopefully, because I don't know, but
yeah.
we'll see. And then like just to be able to roll out and that sort of thing as well. Like, are there any other concerns that you have, like more for this going on in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, just as you said, like I think things just get pushed back. And also,
Yeah.
implementation is, because I'm thinking about, when I mentioned the executive order from August, that is a different way of overseeing grant making in the agency. So they need to plan out the new eligibility requirements, terms and conditions, and also reviewing any any notices of grant award before there's funding allocated. So if all of those things, it's like a trickle down effect, and one decision can impact how it's implemented at the agency level, and then obviously at the program level. So
Mhm.
then that's so I mean I think that things will start to move, but it's just going to take a little bit of time to get the trains running again.
Yeah.
So, and if there's any additional people who are laid off, which I know that has been something that has been discussed, then that could impact some of the programs as well. So, we just kind of have to wait and see how that takes shape. But yeah, but it will start to move. But just things are going to probably be a little slow over the next couple months. So.
Right. And then for those organizations that might be in that bind right now that need the funding, they don't really have the set aside to kind of cash roll any of this right now. Like, do you have any recommendations to them on what some, things to move forward on how to kind of
So
measure,
there's
stop those gaps?
yeah. So I mean, I talk a lot about risk planning when I do
Mhm.
trainings, and I think that I mean, I hate to say that if there's one good thing that has come from this is like maybe putting a spotlight on those areas that a lot of organizations tend to not dive into as much, like risk assessment and planning, and looking at, some of the programs and seeing, is this necessary to what we want to do? Is this necessary? Is this part of our strategic priorities? So I feel like it's kind of getting down to the basics of, why are we here? What are we doing that's of value? How are we best serving our constituents? And then
Mhm.
really doing that deep dive. So I feel like that's an opportunity to kind of really assess, because maybe you won't be able to do business as usual. And I think you have to look at each of those different funding streams that you have, government or
Mhm.
non-governmental, and say, what is the risk that we could potentially lose this? And you really have to
Yeah.
shore up your, storytelling and get your board on board to really provide that extra level of advocacy. And I've also been trying to encourage more uh, working together and collaborating on proposals, because I do think the
Mhm.
collective impact model is definitely going to be more of the way to go, is with less resources
Yeah.
to go around. So those are just some of the basic strategies that I've
Mhm.
been trying to share.
No, I love that. And I think that's really important. We are seeing like a lot of organizations streamlining their budgets, streamlining, right, all their functions, like, and really, and kind of like I've been diving into this term of MVP, like minimum valuable product. Like, what is that valuable? What is the most essential? And like being, like more result oriented towards that. And then like cutting out any, I don't say fluff, but sometimes I'm like, oh, for grant writers and your services, yeah, cut out the fluff. For nonprofits, like really thinking like what are the 1 to 3 top priorities, right, that we have right now, and how are we going to keep those funded through diverse funds, as you mentioned, right? So interesting to really tie into this. So even if once the budget's passed, once all the things are done, once the government opens back up, because it's going to happen, what does that look like? What does that new budget look like for nonprofits, for
Ah,
grants? Like what? Yeah.
yes. Well, and I think the thing is that we know that there's going to be program cuts. Like that's just clear. We've all seen the results of that. And I know that people have been focusing on the Medicaid and SNAP cuts, but those won't go into effect right away. So there is going to
Okay.
be a bit of reprieve. So we are going to start to see, especially, renewal opportunities are not going to be available, but there might be new opportunities in this place, because I know that there is a focus on workforce development. There is a focus on rural communities. There is a focus on technology and infrastructure. So there is a focus on specific areas. So it's just leaning into that. So if you're a municipality, leaning into certain areas, community colleges are probably going to bode well, and also those who do workforce development. And so I
Mhm.
think that there are certain areas, but in general, for nonprofits, I think that there is going to be more of a focus on executive compensation, and having a cap on that, and taxing that. And the thing is that those are really for the bigger nonprofits. Like you're talking about
Mhm.
universities, healthcare systems with
Right.
CEOs are paid millions of dollars. That's not the case for most nonprofits. And so
Yeah.
there's that. And I think also we have to look at the philanthropic side as well, because there's going to be more scrutiny on the caps on corporate funding, corporate donations and also foundation giving as well. And so how that plays out into it. And the other thing too, just in general for nonprofits, because there's been so much politicization of the process that has not happened before, there's an easier way to rescind nonprofit status, that is part of it. And, and I don't think that impacts most nonprofits. I think it is also just to kind of keep people in line and adhere to the executive orders that have been issued. But, it's just another layer. So those are some of the byproducts of the bill. And, we're just going to see, how that looks for the different organizations or the different agencies and how, they're going to author, because that's the thing. We can't, we haven't seen the final bill yet until things are authorized.
Right. Yeah. But those are some of the things that moving forward, more funding put into different areas. So there's funding there. It's just in different buckets. There has been cuts, the things. So there will be an evaluation of what that budget looks like, because that's going to give us really good information on what grants are going to be awarded, right? Like what's going on. So that's important information. Once again, for you to have a grant strategist to be paying attention and to decipher all of that, right? Because that takes work. It takes time. It takes looking at those kind of things. And then the knowledge to say, hey, you have this program, and yeah, like, maybe you were serving this, but maybe we call it workforce this time instead of this word. Like there's certain things, you know what I mean, to kind of like align it with, and not to like mission drifting or scope, all that kind of stuff. But like sometimes it is just repositioning it a little bit, right? As well. But yeah, any other feedback on it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and it's not the worst thing to support rural areas because they have been so into the process. So I don't hate that, obviously not to the exclusion of other areas, but I do believe that if there's some lining, it's just maybe there are opportunities. Maybe there are opportunities to support more technical education to get people who are out of high school into programs, and having different pathways, because that could really help elevate. So I don't hate some of those ideas. I think we just have to get into the mindset of how we can embrace them, and align with them in a way that makes sense for what you do and how you support your community. So I think we have to come in with a more open mind of how we can leverage different resources.
Oh yeah, there's that curiosity, right, that we need to have, and by looking at it, to be open then to know how to align with that. And I think that's the beauty of what grant writers can really bring to the table too, and grant strategists, is having that open mind and the ability to be like, instead of just like, oh, this isn't a good fit, it's like, well, like let's look at it from this perspective. And we just need to be kind of like looking at things through a different lens right now to get that type of funding, right? And there's risk involved with that. And are you ready to, do you want to go through that risk to go through that to get those fundings for this program? So yeah, and those are just decisions people are making right now. But having that information and knowing what's on the line and knowing what's out there and how to address it, like that's just, like you mentioned, that's always kind of been part of grant writing too. So it is like, okay, when are we actually going to fall back into that normalcy? Hopefully soon, you know what I mean? Like, but I mean, it is different. It is a different type of normal now, but that's okay. Like we're still seeing people win grants. We're still seeing organizations get funding and be able to keep it, and all of the things, and move forward. So any last words on the government shutdown, just the state of grants in 2025 and what you're seeing going into 2026?
Oh, I mean, I think we just have to be flexible. I think and, as I said, be open-minded. And I think we just have to just know that things are going to change. And I think that because the federal grants process has been so stable and so reliable, that it has really been just whiplash for so many.
Yeah.
And I think that has been the biggest change. So I think that we have to be able to adapt. If you don't adapt, then you simply won't be able to continue, in this sector. And you have to be able to be responsive and just be aware of the fact that, we know that, will it get to a more normalized state? I do hope so. I think that we're just kind of living through a point in time right now that there's no precedent. And I think that's what's hard to capture. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I love the work that you're doing. You're continuing to do training. You're continuing to be out there doing speaking engagements such as this, where you can really talk more about this and really break it down. Because you said there's no precedent, but like moving forward and hearing from people, like, and knowing like you're like in the middle, like you're my Fed trainer, like you're about federal grants, you're about federal compliance, you're about, you know what I mean? And your eyes have really been on this and studying this. So I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us, and always like reaching out to me and all of the things in LinkedIn that you're doing. So if you guys are not following Rachel, follow her on LinkedIn so you guys to see like these more up-to-date things moment by moment. But where else can they find you on the web?
On the good old web. Just go to myfedtrainer.com. We're doing a lot of trainings, and we're going to be revamping our trainings in the coming year just to be more responsive, honestly, to the things that are happening. So be on the lookout for that. And, we're really trying to support folks where they are, even if you've had 20 years or 2 years, wherever you are, we really just want to help get you where you need to be.
Yeah, love it so much. All right. Well, thank you again, Rachel, for coming back on the Grant Writing and Funding podcast. And I will see you back on LinkedIn and other places, and I'm sure we'll have you back on.
Okay.
So
Sounds
enjoy,
good.
and hopefully the shutdown won't last long. Hopefully by the time we publish this, it's open. So
yes, exactly. Hopefully this will be a distant memory and we'll look back and laugh at this. Remember that time with that silly little shutdown? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. We can dream.
Yes,
All right. Thank you
exactly.
so much for everything you're doing in the grant writing industry. It is absolutely amazing. And just also like real quick, any words just of hope. What I'm feeling like is grant writers, we've just been so traumatized this year in so many ways. And I don't even need to giggle, but I'm like, oh my gosh, we kind of have been. And some grant writers are like, I'm good because they're writing found whatever. But there's AI even. There's like all the other things we haven't even talked about that have impacted our industry in big ways this year. So any just like to calm someone's nervous system, just to like how you've been, just to like, because you're still like your business is still making money too. You're still helping folks keep money from getting grants and all of the things, like just some words of hope for people out there, for grant writers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that some of the things that I have seen that have been really positive are working together and really, and I think also honing what you do. I think really dialing in on what you stand out, and then and leveraging your partners for other things. I think that there's a lot that can be done by working together. And I feel like, we have to just break down some of those silos and just know that, we're all kind of in a similar boat, even in different ways. It doesn't matter if you're a huge firm or if you're working, as a solopreneur, it really is the same thing. So I would say to just be kind to yourself and to just and focus on what you're really good at and what you want to do. Because I feel like the more that you're happy, then the more people see that and the more they want to engage with you. So I would say that. Yeah.
I love that. So centering in your joy and also having community, right? And yeah, having those partnerships. I love that so much. Well, thank you so much again, Rachel, for coming on the show, and we'll see you back on the other side of LinkedIn.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.